Most scholars agree that Mark was the first of the Gospels written about AD 70. It was written in Greek for a Gentile audience of Greek-speaking Christians, which is why the author needed to explain Jewish traditions and translate Aramaic terms. We heard this morning the beginning of the first chapter of Mark that starts the life of Jesus rather abruptly. There's no story of a miraculous birth, no Mary, no Joseph, no angels, no wise men, nothing until Jesus begins his ministry at about the age of 30 years of age. And Mark ends his gospel just as abruptly. The original text ending at chapter 13, verse 8, when Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Salome, entered the tomb to find it empty. Now, some likely find this disturbing. And it's possible that the other gospel writers sought to soften Mark's abruptness by including things like the virgin birth. And later readers of Mark must have also sensed the same thing, which is likely why they added 11 verses to the original ending of his gospel. Mark's gospel starts out the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, as it is written in the prophet Isaiah. Now, remember that Mark was writing to a group of Gentiles who didn't know the Jewish prophets. So he had to explain to them why Jesus was the Son of God come to earth. In order to understand the nature of the Jesus movement as described by Mark, we must first rethink the backstories of centuries that has influenced our understanding of the life of Jesus. Like many today, some in Mark's congregation were probably skeptical of the claim of Christ's divinity. So the first verses of Mark were absolutely essential to capture the attention of his audience. It had to entice them to read further about the life of Jesus, his miracles, and his teachings. Mark's foundation of the Jesus movement is the prophetic history of Judaism, and by invoking the words of the prophet Isaiah, he reminds us all that all movements are the results of earlier events. The challenge is that Mark's quotation is not entirely from Isaiah. The first half is from Malachi chapter 3. The second half is from Isaiah chapter 40, which we also heard this morning in our Old Testament reading. Well, Mark was trying to reach a community of Gentiles, and after all, they probably didn't know the difference between Malachi and Isaiah. Okay, so Mark took some literary license in his writing, but that doesn't mean that it can't still reach us and teach us. First of all, it tells us that the Bible was written by men. Men that wrote what they saw and heard or heard from others. Some, like Mark, may have embellished their writings in order to make it more relevant to their congregations. And like all men, some made mistakes. And over the years, there have been translations upon translations upon translations, and transcription errors and changes upon changes, all by well-meaning theologians. Now, some believe that Mark's gospel is the most historically accurate and that stories such as the birth narrative were added in order to meet Judaic prophecy. Regardless, the basic teachings of the Bible remain intact, and that is what is important to all of us today. Remember, Mark was the first gospel written about Jesus, and in his opening verse, he suggests the coming of Jesus is the beginning of a new movement, the Jesus movement, or as we now know it, Christianity. The initial movement itself was abrupt, just like his gospel. It started abruptly and ended just as abruptly on the cross. Jesus' ministry lasted a mere 3 short years. During that time, he taught us how to live, how to love God, how to love our neighbors, and even how to love those who would call us enemy. As children, we were taught from an early age that Santa keeps a list of those who have been naughty and nice. If only it would be so easy to teach everyone to love Christ and to assist those who are less fortunate than ourselves. So that is our challenge today as we approach Christmas, to love others as we love Christ, and to help those less fortunate than ourselves. Amen.